in the room.
Well, it's wonderful to hear your voice again. And welcome, everyone. It's a great pleasure and a great honor, as always, to be hosting Silke. She is someone who works across genres. She's a ceramicist and a painter. She's written a verse novel. And she is one of the local poets that we have who keep writing poems that sing and are lyrical and that ensure that there is no shortage of wonder in the world, that we're never in short supply of wonder. And so it's wonderful to be welcoming you tonight. I'm really looking forward to this. And I thought what to read, and I thought of reading something by Yeats, your one of your favorites and mine. But I settled on this by Dylan Thomas. In my craft or sullen art, exercised in the still night, when only the moon rages and the lovers lie abed with all their griefs in their arms, I labor by singing light, not for ambition or bread or the strut and trade of charms on the ivory stages, but for the common wages of their most secret heart. Not for the proud man apart from the raging moon I write on these spindrift pages, nor for the towering dead with their nightingales and psalms, but for the lovers, their arms round the griefs of the ages, who pay no praise or wages, nor heed my craft or art. And with that, please give a warm hand of applause to Silke. Can you unmute yourselves and do that? I'm going to mute myself now. Over to you.
Thank you so very much, Jacques. Gee, that's quite a hard act to follow, but in terms of the value that it speaks, that poem that you read by Dylan Thomas, yes, I would say I'm holding that flag too. Thank you so much for your lovely introduction, and thank you for hosting me and the Red Wheelbarrow team. And thank you everybody who has made time tonight to be here. I will do my level best to make it worth your while. I have got my poems written, so I can actually share my screen, which I usually like to do. So can we do that?
Sure. Do you have the option to share your screen? If you have the option, please do so.
Where do I do it from my screen sharing? I usually do, yes, share screen, host disabled participant screen sharing.
I'm going to try and enable that now.
Okay.
Give me a moment. Well, if I can. If I can't, it would be cool if you can email me. Okay, actually, I'll make you co-host and you should have the option.
Okay.
Done.
There we are. Can you see my screen?
It's loading.
Okay, Well, I'm going to just say a few words about the 18 poems that I've chosen for tonight. I chose them according to quite, well, on the one hand, quite a narrow theme, but on the other hand, an infinitely far-reaching theme, which is really the relationship between the living, unmediated body, if there is such a thing, and language, which is part of the body, part of the human body. And the miracle of embodiment, so much of which is beyond words, and the miracle of being able to sing, put things into words, put things into poetry. That combination is a fascinating one, and I find that I've written poems touching on that theme for many, many years. I'm going to start with a poem that was published in 2003 called Hands on Paper. To my teacher. I'm impatient with these doors, these sticking locks and warped frames full of resistances. I want to break through. I want no locks, no doors. I'm a buffalo in the riverbed, trampling tussocks, melting the grassy juices. I have teachers in books, but I want you to reappear in my life as a live body, as you with your hair standing up and your eyes brimming and slow, muscled hands. I am in love with the thoughtfulness of your hands upon books, rustling papers. I am moved by their hesitations. I dream of your hands holding me, reading me blindly, without thought, without hesitation. This poem I wrote when I was registered for a creative writing MA at UCT, which went terribly awry at first. I did end up doing it because I lost control of my medium, language, and actually suffered a thankfully temporary mental illness from which I recovered with the loving help from my family and friends, but also with the help of language. Wrestling myself out of that pit, I started inventing a new poetic form called the butterfly stanza, which many of you are familiar with, but for the sake of those of you who aren't, I'll just quickly describe it. I wanted and needed to slow, well, the world down, but basically myself. I needed to slow my own thoughts down, the rhythms and pace of my own thinking. So I thought, let me do that by writing in long meter, long feet, the trochaic and anapestic meter, da, 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 and da, 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 with a 3-beat rhythm, which is not particularly usual in English poetry, but it is possible, as I discovered, and it's actually mimicking the Homeric rhythms, the Odyssey, which has starts with trochaic meter, and the butterfly stanzas are 16-line poems that are basically invented based on butterflies, with alternating 6 and 5 feet lines, with a very unobtrusive rhyme scheme, whereby the last word of the first line rhymes with the last word of the last line, the last word of the second line rhymes with the last word of the second last, and so on, so that you end up having a little couplet in the middle of the poem. And although they are very block-like visually on the page, reading them aloud has been quite an interesting experience because the audiences generally enjoy the music. This particular butterfly is about the loss of my mind in language. When you lose control, sometimes what happens with writing is depths which you plunge as you go, diving further and feeling the bubbles attached to your face. This can frighten in retrospect, once you've emerged again, finding your weight, so to speak, though on land where your body's not budged for some hours. What have I done? You may think. As in shock, you will read over lines which before it seemed fitting, but now are all showing bared teeth, drooling tongues, as if mocking your efforts with glee. It is then that you need, above all, to remember how fragile you are and how small, beside language, your chisel and sword, which you love, but whose call can ensnare you in chords. Like electric sea eels, words can breed stunning auras that knock you quite senseless, embrace with a wreath of brute beauty your innocent mood. Then please stop and reflect on your rhymes and resist at all costs the vortex of words and their powers. Disengage the deep sea creatures' suction pads. Don't fret. Hold on to the meaningless things and receive their mute grace. And breathe air into lungs that you share with a sweet common life that you know. I had never experimented very much with the haiku form. And while I was very much still exploring the possibilities of the butterfly poems, in fact, the verse novel was created consisting entirely of butterfly stanzas, Norman Morrissey, the man who became my second husband, came to Fishhook to give a haiku workshop. And at that haiku workshop, I explored or examined, let me say, examined by means of haiku, the butterfly poems. And in fact, the haiku that I created a few, but this one, 5 Butterfly Prints, was printed published by New Coin, and even won the 3rd prize in the Dalro Awards. 5 Butterfly Prints. 1. Are your butterflies fit for the future, like death? Coffins on wings. 2. Lepidopterist, pinned to the board of a need. You're splayed like Jesus. 3. Free as flakes of ash from a campfire, white now. You wanted to fly. 4. Some butterflies don't have mouths. They don't sing or eat. Lungs, like Rorschach breaths. 5. If you touch me now, it's the pollen of always at your fingertips. I put up the money to transport Norman to Fishhook, where he gave this haiku workshop at his publisher Jim Phelps's house. But it wasn't my money. It was 1,000 rand that had been lent to my family and myself by a dear university friend who, when I wanted to pay it back to him, he said, "Oh, I forgot I even lent you that. Just pay it forward, please." And that's how I could support Norman to come and give this workshop, which Ed, you probably will remember, and Paul. This is a tribute to the friend, Cliff. Company discipline, to Cliff Speechley. Luck has had me today find opportunity to alight on the bench we used to share in the shade of smooth-skinned trees before a circular fountain, splashing now as it did then, 30-odd years ago, with the comical gestures water thrown upward performs. I remember you here, chuckling about us and our human comedies, without cynicism, with the heart you died of, in that wide chest of yours our gay friends swooned over. We'd sit, chat, chuckle, eat, then return into the library to quiet, intense work. It was our company discipline, as luck would have it. My concentrated heart remembers your expansive one, remembers those days in the sun, on the bench, and in the William Cullen Library, our company discipline, and our love for others. Talking about our love for others, and Cliff really was such a generous-hearted soul. And my heart does seem very concentrated by comparison. And of course, it concentrated onto Norman. And as many of you know, Norman and I put out many little books. I think it was a total of 8 of love poems in dialogue. Some of them were poems of place. And the first of these little books was one called Tryst. And this is an early poem from that first little booklet called Naked. And it speaks very clearly two things: the relationship between the physical body and language, poetic language in particular, but also something which will come up again as I read, the importance of the words of a loved one. To clothe one's own sense of self, I suppose. Naked, my face paints evaporate, my costumes disintegrate, my vuvuzelas become soft like Dali's images of time over the roundness of new days. You've found the core of me laked in my skin, whose pale pinkness you protect with the word pearly. My small breasts smile in their sufficiency to you. My rustic hands, so mapped with roads of blood they make men wince, you praise with capable. Each word you speak pieces together me in my nakedness. The next poem is not about the human body, it's about an ocean, a body in the ocean, mussels. Last night we bride mussels. On the grill over coals, Kai gripped them and dropped them into the dish I presented. We slurped their salty, sea pink, brain body, all is one beings, with lemon, garlic, yogurt, butter, delicious. They'd been flown in from Cape Town, sizzled in the water of their origins. We loved them like the jackal loves lamb and the elephant lush grass. The next poem is from Hogsback Haiku, which was a volume that Norman and I put together about Hogsback to accompany visitors to the village. And it's called Who Sees? And I would like to say before I read it that the seeing is not about just the sense of sight. It is about intelligence, the perception of intelligence. And that intelligence, I guess I experience not only inside me, but also outside of myself in what surrounds me. Who sees? The mountain's dark brow is outlined by the light, while my eyelashes glint and tremble in the face of the setting sun. Never sorry. The trees around the village green speak with their leaves in ways they never have to be sorry for. This poem, also about language and the body, makes reference to Robert Graves's The Cool Web, retreat from too much joy or too much pain or something like that, where he, as I understand that poem or was taught that poem, describes language putting itself between oneself and one's feelings and one's experiences. More authority. The hair on your arms and the backs of your hands is a little prickly. Its touch makes my skin fizz. Such speech, such delicate and direct articulateness has more authority than the sticky web, however cool it may be, of language. Now we go below the skin to that organ, that mysterious organ, the heart. And the language in this poem is tremendously simple. Well, in many of my poems, I suppose it is. But here it is profoundly important. And perhaps this is the reason my writing or vocabulary normally is, or often is, very simple. Not a thing, but a reliable keeper. Things change, but my heart is not a thing. The seat of feelings is open to what these feelings bring. This mystery of blood and muscle you can hurt and kill, but you can't subject it to the rule of human will. It can be frightened and confused by lies and subterfuge. A sophisticated twist of words can render it accused. But finally, all that's false is refused. My heart is a reliable keeper of all that is timeless. Things change, yes, but my heart is not a thing. Love is at home in it. Amen. Yeah, this poem was published in A Shell Held to the Ear, which was the last of the Love Duet booklets that Norman and I published while he was alive. He died the following year. This poem is called Veil. Drizzle, such a lovely veil for my tears. And now we jump back to 1997, a poem that I wrote when I was actually 6 months pregnant with my son. And I put it here to say something about the timelessness or the continuity of love through change, through huge changes. How when you love in your heart and in your body, that is a constant. So this is an old poem, which was initially published in New Coin as well. The loving body, and it takes up from Elizabeth Browning, How Do I Love Thee? Let Me Count the Ways. I don't think it is possible to count the ways in which I love you. My love is a body with the round face of a clock, whose fingers change its moods and pass old feelings on through time and hand-carved woods. It is a bowl overflowing with fruit filled when returned from the shopping, or empty with our fingers and mouths sticky with sweet sap dripping. We wipe away such love, and yet it comes again. It is a sea or mountain that never goes away. It may be burnt, it may be scarred, it may be full of shrapnel and shells. It may be grey with experience, defeated by memories, hells. But still, my love is a living bird with wings that breathe like lungs, steering itself beyond the rungs of first and second and third. It runs with feet away and toward. It remembers itself like sound. Whenever we meet, it falls and rises, repeats, escapes, is found. Time is my life, is all I have. The circle of my heart, it moves beyond the centuries and plays its part. It holds you and loses. It dances and chooses. And we leap forward, brandishing that flag that you read in Dylan Thomas's poem. This is called Usherer of Love. And this is to the Ed that is called my Ed or Eastern Cape Ed. He comes in from the crisp autumn night. Close your eyes, he says. I want to show you a surprise. Leads her blind outside and head back as directed. Looking up, she opens her eyes to the firmament's velvet. A skin roughed up with silver pores, bristling with smudges of light, and Scorpio rising on its side, and exactly above a sudden slash of fire. It's a shooting star, she cries. both middle-aged, 2 divorces between them, his near death and her widowing. They know how to give in together to the moment's usherings of love. And this next poem, The Age of the Lover, is actually the ultimate poem in the 6th section of Greater Matter, the big tribute that I wrote to Norman after he died. And there was a section there called Shaman, about very non-rational experiences I experienced during my journey of grief. This is the poem that ends that section. Age of the Lover. My husband, as he lay dying, observed this was the age of power. We had forgotten, said he, the age of the lover. That time when intention was known as something that could blossom into fact. And he crossed over with a legacy of living flame, of spirit on the water, singing still. And one of the difficulties that not only I have, I know that probably all of you and many, many others have with what Norman referred to as the age of power is the abuse of language, the misuse, the abuse of language. We come back to more specifically the female body in this little poem pair from Sweet Nothings, which was a little book I published in 2020, shortly before lockdown. And it speaks for itself. It's called Phoenix Poem Pair, clean. Poems petaling the fresh mound of the grave. Will decompose soon into loam. The womb is clean that sloughs the flowers which never open. Two, gathered. There are so many men and women yearning. For them, the learning gathered in my poems. It amazes me, just talking about the womb is clean that sloughs the flowers which never open, how a woman's body, you know, every unfertilized egg is just, sloughed off. Everything, every potential that is not, fertilized, isn't nurtured, isn't given a chance, is just got rid of. And there's something harsh and wonderful and essential about that. One of my favorite pieces of graffiti is War is Menstrual Envy. Now we get to the unpublished poems. 3 surprises. Every year at the anniversary of Norman's death, I listen out for a poem about that experience. And every year I'm surprised anew at a new little morsel of insight. And well, those of you who know me, I love thinking. My mind doesn't like being idle. So when I get morsels of insight, I'm very grateful. Indelible birthplace. This morning, 6 years back, your spirit drove out of your form. It dove into my womb like a whale, free in the ocean, where it swam immediately, a living library, recording and remembering. It wasn't a question or a proposition. It was an indelible sensation. Christine wept, and Peter handed me a whiskey. And the two men who'd carried you from the car to the blue room came and put their textured palms against your forehead and nodded to themselves that you were indeed cold. I'd not yet got round to trimming your toenails, so the undertaker waited while I clipped them for your large, elegant feet to be ready for the immolation. It was my last act of love to your body. Your shapes and fragrances, your varied voices are unforgotten in the sea of memory, that birthplace of creation in which my body played its mysterious part. And I've just got to say a little thank you to Marika for, I did get your edits, your comments, and I didn't take them all, as you can see, but I worked with some of them. And yeah, this is still, it's an unpublished poem. It's still in process. Thank you, Marika, for your comments on this poem. This is a bit of a Whitman-esque poem. I'm not sure of it, but I wanted to try it out tonight. It's working, it's now, this poem, Writing Indelible Birthplace, really gave me something to hold on to, which I then explored in my last nugget. Those of you who don't know my nuggets, they're available on my website on the nugget page. And it explores the idea of the womb as a metaphor for essentially the right brain, the creative, contemplative, thinking powers, not of the alphabet. The womb in my brain is not of the alphabet. It holds my left hand, which is holding the book, into whose pages my right hand writes, to assist the womb in my brain. You can look in the same direction as I am looking, but you cannot think like me, nor do you have my feet taking you forward to my forms of sanity. But you can consider that a thinking woman is an ocean. You can't take her away in cups. You can stand in awe, breathe in the vapor of her never-resting body of living water, deeper than blood, darker than fear, safer than illusions. Give up your wanting to understand her, to the laughter in the bubbles that continue to give birth to Aphrodite. And don't for a moment submit to her power, for then her turquoise love foaming over the rocks will reduce to mere words again. And my last poem, about one of the experiences most dear to my heart, where what really matters so often happens. Pillow talk. We wake, as so often, simultaneously. The moon is still high and illumines our conversation. I say that it's me who's lost, not you. You reply that you dreamed that you can't listen because you forerun the other sentences before they can finish. You were so harmed by words in the past that you are permanently anxious of more hurt. I answer by sharing my grief that you and others can't take in, for all kinds of reasons, the nourishment of my carefully picked words. Then you nourish me. Tell me I'm a medicine woman, healer, teacher. A dusting of peace tingles over my heart. Subtle cascades of pleasure reach around my underarms, ease my shoulders. The touch of your words is magic. My woman body wakens. You fall asleep. I rise, wrap myself in blankets, right. The moon slips below the horizon. Thank you. That's my poems for tonight.
Jacques, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
That is very fortunate. Silke, that was a stunning, beautiful reading. Thank you very much for making us feel, for making us think at the same time. I'm sure there'll be questions, but before we do that, can everyone please unmute themselves and give Silke a warm round? I'm going to hand over to Nondwe now, my co-host, who will sort of pick up hands. After that, we'll have a short break, 5 minutes, and then an open mic session. Please bring something to read. So I'm going to hand over. But thank you. That was gorgeous.
Hello, everybody. I haven't shown my video because I'm currently load shedding, so I'm in the dark. Silke, thank you so much for a lovely reading, and I see people agree. Troyden says beautiful work, Hilda beautiful, and Inka says thanks Silke, beautiful. And so Ilse also says very moving words, dear Silke, thank you. And already there are questions. So Jacques, then Marika. Jacques, the floor is yours, and then we'll have Marika.
So yeah, I have many questions, but okay, I'll try to angle it in such a way that I narrow them down to one. I'm interested in your faith in language, because it's very clear from the poems you read early on that you went through a real crisis of language. And of course, you're in good company. I'm thinking of Hofmannsthal, the great Austrian poet, who went through a crisis of language at the turn of the century, and kept writing, but didn't write poetry again. I'm curious about the faith that keeps you, that kept you going. And you also went through this very intense experience of sharing the writing of poems with another poet. And then you had to keep writing in the absence of that other voice. You spoke about that. So those are two sort of crises of language, really. I'm very curious about the faith. What is it that keeps you going? What is it that keeps you writing? I would love to hear you say something about that.
Well,
No.
thank you for the question. It's a very interesting and important question, but I fear that I can't answer it in the way I would probably like to, because it's probably not a matter of faith. It's a matter of helplessness. Before I did gain more control over the English language, English is not my mother tongue. And this is not corrigible. One cannot reclaim those 6 years that were lost to German. I learned English when I was 6, going on 7. And when I first started writing poetry, I wrote in English because I was educated in English, but I had no, it was mad. It was mad writing. Nobody understood a word of it. Nobody understood a word. And that was the case for a very long time. Also because I was ashamed that I was writing, and so didn't in fact tend to share it with anyone. And so when I did, it was, so I'm rambling. Point being that the words just kept coming. The words just kept coming. The words were almost like attacking my brain, attacking my mind. And it's taken a lifetime, well, up to now, to discipline the words in my brain that come. And that discipline has been a joy. And it's come slowly with the support of many, with the support, my first husband, Paul, always was encouraging. Hugh, at Off the Wall, played a huge role. Norman, of course, everybody knows how important a role he played. My mother, who never understood what I was trying to say and would stubbornly say, I don't understand, she helped too, to discipline me to try and be as communicative as possible. But the attacks from language to my head, they're not attacks anymore because I've disciplined the language. And so now they've become acceptable and malleable. It's almost as if initially when the language came in my younger years, it was like rough clay, rough and full of grog and too hard to work with, too rough. And over many years of work at it, it's become what it is now. So no, it's not faith. It's not faith. I was actually thinking about addiction because it has, battled a lot with his nicotine addiction, which he's very wonderfully now, off. But I was thinking about, am I addicted to writing? What would happen if somebody would take away my pen and paper, well, I suppose I would sing. Long answer to a question. Sorry, Jacques.
It's a good word. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacques. Marika?
Thank you. I was almost like there's more to say that I really appreciate how you shared the process that you in different times, and I was quite struck by how the butterfly poems or your earlier poems seem to be more almost like a more formal, and how your what you now described as your discipline of writing, or your how that has actually led you to freer forms. So I was just so it's slightly more of a comment on that, but I really appreciated that. And you know, we're addicted to breathing too, so maybe it has to do with how self-destructive or how destructive to others one's addictions are.
I think I agree with that. Thank you, Marika. Yes, using the more natural way of speaking, I have really Norman directly to thank for that style, because that was the style that he believed in very much, following D.H. Lawrence. And Jim can tell you so much more about that. But yeah, to trust, he's actually got a poem somewhere. Trust your tongue knows her way around your mouth very well. Trust it, or something like that. It's a lovely little poem of encouragement to me to write more spontaneously. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Silke. Thank you, Marika. Are there any other questions or comments in the room? There are some comments in the chat from Derek. Wonderful. I remember Hogsback workshop with Dolben years ago. And we have Ruth, who says, thank you. Beautiful work indeed. Ed, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Nanda. Silke, my head is sort of leaping in all sorts of directions, because I found that the poems covered so many facets, things that could be explored. There's an interesting relationship for me between what one might call the mystical and the visceral, and in a lot of the poems. And yeah, perhaps the poem in which they're the most, there's a fusion of those ideas, perhaps is Indelible Birthplace. And yeah, then there's the ambivalence about language, which is alluded to right at the beginning in the poem about losing control, and it's echoed again later with the one of the second last poem, I think, Not to the Alphabet, where there's a desire not to reduce things to language and to keep things mystery, essentially. Yeah, but then there's also the desire for language, which is embodied, which is nourishing, which can be sort of felt viscerally at the level of the body. So I'm just rambling, as you can hear, but for these and other reasons, some generous and fascinating reading. Thank you. I don't really have a question, but it was great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ed. Talking about the language, I think what's important is perhaps that opposition between the age of power and the age of the lover, because the age of power, you know, really for me is exemplified in the abuse of language, in disingenuous utterances, in frank lies, but more often in
truths,
in utterances where people are not aware of their own motivations. And of course, the age of the lover, or the lover's voice, the lover's language is exemplified by poetry. And perhaps the most significant difference for me in terms of the language of poetry and the language of other genres, not creative genres, but say technical writing, scientific writing, legal writing. The main difference is in, whereas in the more, where language is used, you know, transparently, the words are things. The words are things. They just are put down as if they were, yeah, things. Whereas for me, I would describe poetic language uses words, uses the space between the words, uses the words almost as hollow vessels, as cups, you know, to give, here, drink. That for me is the difference in the language. And in a conversation, it's the same. When people speak, you can feel or hear or see if they're offering a cup of thought, or if they're saying this is what it's like. You know, it's differences in language, and it's so powerful. And in Eastern Cape, it has made me so aware of that. One of my first nuggets about the ear, as the sensitivity of the ear being an opening, a very, very sensitive opening on the human body, which is constantly, you know, receiving, you know, so much stimulus in the form of different languages. I don't even think, you know, most people don't even, they're not aware of what they are actually letting in.
I hear you. Well, the opposite of utilitarian language, and if you can call it that. And yeah, there are plenty of instances in reading where language is a kind of magic, you know, to the transformational possibilities of language are right there. Thank you.
Alrighty, thank you, Ed. Mary also says your poems are indeed so simple and profound. Are there any other questions or comments before we take a small little break? Okay, so if there are no questions and there are no comments, thank you, Silke. Can we please give Silke another round of applause? Thank you for sharing your words with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
So we are going to take a 5-minute break. So we'll be back
Thank you
at 8:35.
so much. I just want to say thank you to everyone who's here, and special thank you to Inka, who's coming from Santiago. I think Santiago, Inka, in Chile anyway. So thank you everybody who's made it so, so special. Thank you, and thank you for your beautiful comments and your beautiful ears.
All right, so with that, we'll be back at 8:35.
Go. I'm a bit sad.